December 7, 1941, 8:01 a.m. Oahu, Hawaii. You hear it before you understand it. A rising metallic scream, the kind that cuts through warm morning air and turns heads instinctively toward the sky. Sailors on the decks of battleships pause mid-sentence. Coffee cups freeze halfway to lips. Then the first explosions hit, sharp, concussive, echoing across the harbor like thunder trapped inside steel. Black smoke begins to coil upward from Battleship Row. Within minutes, Pearl Harbor is chaos. Oil burns on the water's surface, men dive over rails to escape flames, anti-aircraft guns fire blindly into a sky already thick with enemy aircraft. The Pacific Fleet, America's visible symbol of power, lies exposed, confused, and bleeding. By noon, it's over. 18 ships damaged or sunk. Over 2,400 Americans dead. The harbor is littered with twisted metal, shattered hulls, and the unmistakable feeling of humiliation. For Axis analysts watching from Berlin and Tokyo, the conclusion seems obvious. America has been caught flat-footed. America is unprepared. America, they believe, will react emotionally, slowly, clumsily. They have seen this before. In 1940, France collapsed in weeks. British forces barely escaped Dunkirk. Every major power that stumbled early stayed wounded. Defeat in Axis doctrine was a stain, something that lingered, weakened morale, fractured command. So when reports of Pearl Harbor reach German intelligence desks, there is confidence. The Americans will panic. They will argue. They will waste months assigning blame. That assumption, quietly recorded in briefing notes and intelligence estimates, will become one of the most expensive miscalculations of the war. Because in Washington, in factories and training fields, something very different is happening. There are no victory parades for survival, no speeches about honor salvaged from disaster. There are notebooks, clipboards, after-action reports stacked shoulder-high. Within hours of the attack, officers are already documenting everything: response times, ammunition failures, communication breakdowns, radar warnings that went unheeded. There is anger, yes, but it is focused, cold, methodical. Who failed? Why did it fail? And how fast can it be fixed? You can almost feel the shift happen, not emotionally but structurally. In other armies, defeat is absorbed by pride. In this one, defeat is dissected. By the end of December, the U.S. Navy has rewritten air defense protocols. Radar coverage is expanded. Command authority is clarified. Ammunition storage procedures are changed. Training syllabi are updated, not next year, not after a committee debate, but immediately. The lesson is simple and brutal. Surprise cannot be allowed to work twice. Axis intelligence notices some of this, but misunderstands its significance. German analysts assume these are cosmetic changes, paper corrections. They have seen bureaucracies react before, loudly, visibly, inefficiently. What they don't see is the deeper transformation underway. Because Pearl Harbor doesn't just change doctrine, it changes behavior. Across the continental United States, training accidents spike, not because standards have fallen, but because tempo has exploded. Pilots are flying more hours. Crews are drilling longer days. Exercises are pushed to failure points on purpose. Mistakes are encouraged, then punished by repetition, not shame. A pilot who botches a carrier landing isn't quietly removed. He's debriefed, retrained, and sent back up again until the mistake disappears. In Axis air forces, errors are career-ending. In the American system forming now, they are data points. And data moves fast. By early 1942, U.S. naval aviation manuals are being revised monthly, sometimes weekly. Lessons from the Coral Sea are already influencing tactics at Midway. Signals intelligence failures are addressed in real time. Commanders are rotated not for loyalty, but for results. To German observers, this looks chaotic. Too many changes, too much experimentation, too little tradition. They mistake adaptability for weakness. Then comes the Battle of the Coral Sea. It's not a clear victory. American losses are heavy. A carrier is lost. Aircraft numbers are thin. By classical European standards, it's a strategic draw at best. But something alarms Japanese and German analysts alike. The Americans adjust mid-battle. Flight decks reorganize faster. Strike coordination improves within days. Defensive fighter patrols change altitude patterns based on combat reports that are barely hours old. This isn't how wars are supposed to be fought. In Axis planning, adaptation happens between campaigns, after months of study, revision, and approval. Here, it's happening between engagements. And then just weeks later, midway. On paper, the Americans are outnumbered. Their carriers are fewer. Their pilots less experienced. Their intelligence picture incomplete. Yet the ambush works. Japanese carriers burn. The balance of power in the Pacific tilts violently. Axis analysts scramble to explain it. Was it luck? Was it espionage? Was it a one-time fluke? They search for a single reason, because their doctrine teaches that victory or defeat must have one decisive cause. They miss the truth. Midway isn't a miracle. It's a process outcome. Every failure since Pearl Harbor has been fed into a system designed to absorb shock, extract lessons, and redistribute solutions at scale. And that system is only accelerating. By mid-1942, German intelligence reports begin noting something troubling. American units defeated in one engagement return months later, not demoralized but sharper, better coordinated, more lethal. Losses don't seem to harden them. They seem to refine them. This is the moment, quiet, almost invisible, when the war begins to slip out of Axis control. Not because America has won, but because America is learning faster than anyone thought possible. And the Axis has no framework for stopping an enemy that treats failure not as disgrace, but as fuel. Spring 1942. Somewhere in the Arizona desert. The heat ripples above the runway, bending the horizon into a mirage. A line of brand-new aircraft sits nose to tail, paint still clean, metal unscarred. Young pilots, most barely out of flight school, wait beside them, helmets tucked under their arms. They look calm, almost casual. But the men watching from the shade know better. Colonels, training officers, engineers with grease-stained notebooks. They are not here to inspire. They are here to observe failure. The exercise begins badly. Formations break too early. Radio calls overlap. One bomber overshoots its release point by hundreds of yards. A fighter pilot misjudges closure speed and nearly collides with his wingman. In another military culture, this would be a disaster. Careers would stall. Reputations would be quietly buried. Here it is expected. Whistles blow, engines cut. The pilots are marched, not to reprimand, but to a long wooden table covered in maps, diagrams, and clipboards. Why did it happen? Not who. Why? Every error is reconstructed minute by minute. Someone sketches flight paths. Another marks wind drift. A third circles a radio frequency note in red pencil. No raised voices, no speeches about honor. Just a relentless, almost clinical hunger for answers. And once the answers are found, something remarkable happens. They don't stay here. Within days, the conclusions from this desert airfield are typed, duplicated, and distributed across training commands nationwide. Procedures are rewritten, checklists adjusted, new drills are ordered. Pilots in Florida, Texas, California, men who have never met these crews, will change how they fly because of what failed here. This is what Axis analysts never see. They track divisions, production numbers, casualties. They don't track feedback loops. In the German and Japanese systems, doctrine is inherited. It descends from revered victories, from the authority of senior commanders whose reputations were built in earlier wars. To question doctrine is to question the men who embody it. Mistakes, therefore, are dangerous. They suggest weakness. They invite blame. They are hidden, minimized, or reframed as unavoidable. So adaptation moves slowly, carefully, politically. The American system, forming in 1942, has no such restraint. It has no memory worth protecting. Most of its commanders are new. Many are civilians in uniform, engineers, mechanics, factory managers, men whose pre-war lives rewarded efficiency, not tradition. To them, failure is not moral. It is mechanical. Something didn't work, so you fix it. This mindset spreads far beyond training fields. In naval yards, damaged ships are not written off until proven unsalvageable. Crews experiment with repairs that doctrine says should be impossible. When one method works, it becomes standard procedure within weeks. In aircraft design, combat reports from the Pacific are read directly by engineers. Armor is added where pilots were hit. Fuel systems are rerouted where fires started. Cockpit layouts change based on pilot complaints, not theoretical performance charts. Axis analysts notice the changes, but misinterpret them. They see frequent modifications and assume indecision. They see constant updates and assume instability. They do not understand that these changes are not symptoms of confusion. They are symptoms of learning. By late 1942, German intelligence reports begin noting something deeply unsettling. American equipment improves faster than expected. Aircraft introduced as mediocre reappear months later noticeably more survivable. Ships once vulnerable now absorb damage and continue fighting. Units previously green operate with growing confidence. There is no single breakthrough to explain it. No wonder weapon. No genius commander. Just momentum. And momentum is difficult to counter when it feeds on its own mistakes. Nowhere is this clearer than in the air war over Europe. Early American bombing missions are disasters. Formations scatter, bombs miss targets, losses mount alarmingly. German fighters tear into tight bomber streams with confidence. Flak crews refine their aim with every raid. From Berlin's perspective, this confirms expectations. The Americans are brave, perhaps, but naive. Their daylight bombing doctrine is flawed. Given time, it will collapse under its own losses. And at first, it seems they are right. American bomber crews die in horrifying numbers. Entire missions fail to achieve objectives. Morale cracks. But something unusual happens. The doctrine changes while the campaign is still underway. Escort tactics evolve. Formation spacing is adjusted. Navigation methods improve. New defensive gun coordination is trained directly from combat footage. Losses are not denied or glorified. They are measured. And then they are used. By early 1943, German pilots begin noticing subtle shifts. Bombers hold formation longer. Defensive fire grows more coordinated. Escort fighters appear deeper into German airspace. Each change is small, almost unnoticeable on its own. But together, they form a pattern. The Americans are not repeating the same mistakes. They are burning through them. Axis intelligence struggles to respond because their analytical tools are outdated. They look for static weaknesses, fixed flaws to exploit. But there is nothing fixed about this enemy. Every time a vulnerability is exposed, it is patched, sometimes clumsily, sometimes expensively, but always quickly. And crucially, the lessons are not isolated. What is learned in the skis over Bremen influences training in Kansas. What fails over Tunisia reshapes tactics in England. The entire war machine behaves like a single, massive organism, absorbing pain, rerouting around damage, growing tougher with each blow. By the end of 1942, a quiet realization begins to form in Axis circles. They are not facing an opponent who must win perfectly. They are facing one who only has to learn faster than they do. And for the first time, some analysts begin to suspect the truth. This is not a temporary advantage. It is a structural one. August 1943, 02:17 a.m. Somewhere over Schweinfurt, Germany. You can feel the aircraft shudder before you hear the flak. Black bursts bloom in the darkness, perfectly timed, perfectly spaced. The bomber formation tightens instinctively, muscle memory drilled into men who have already survived missions they were never meant to survive. A B-17 lurches as shrapnel tears through its fuselage. Oxygen hisses. A gunner slumps. Another aircraft drops out of formation, engines coughing smoke. For German defenders below, this is familiar. They have done this before. They know how this ends. But something is wrong. The formation doesn't unravel. Fighters slash in Messerschmitts, Focke-Wulfs, expecting the usual chaos. Instead, they meet a wall of coordinated defensive fire. Escort fighters arrive sooner than expected, deeper than they should be able to reach. This raid should look like last year. It doesn't. By dawn, the damage is severe on both sides. Losses are still high. Schweinfurt burns. But the Americans return in numbers that should not be possible. German analysts studying the raid feel a growing unease. The enemy they mapped in 1942 is gone. In its place is something sharper, harder to predict. And the most troubling part, the Americans are still changing. In the Axis world, doctrine is written by victory. In the American world, doctrine is written by autopsy. Every mission generates a flood of reports, not ceremonial summaries but brutally specific data, angles of attack, failure rates, radio confusion, gun effectiveness, crew fatigue. Entire squadrons are temporarily pulled from operations not for punishment, but for redesign. Formation patterns are adjusted. Crew positions are rethought. Equipment is swapped out mid-campaign. The war does not pause for doctrine to catch up. Doctrine chases the war. This philosophy reaches its most dangerous form when paired with American industry. In Germany, identifying a flaw does not mean it can be fixed quickly. Resources are scarce. Factories are bombed. Designs are complex, bespoke, and slow to alter. In the United States, discovering a problem triggers a chain reaction. Engineers modify designs. Factories retool. Training commands update manuals. Replacement units arrive already trained in the new methods. What took Germany years to perfect, America replaces in months. Axis intelligence sees the results but not the process. They see new escort fighters and assume a breakthrough design. They see improved bomb accuracy and assume new bomb sites. They don't realize that the real weapon is the interval between problem and solution. And that interval keeps shrinking. Nowhere is this more evident than in the Pacific. Early American carrier battles are chaotic. Communications break down. Aircraft are launched piecemeal. Strikes miss their targets or arrive too late. Japanese commanders, trained in deliberate, pre-planned operations, expect this disorganization to persist. Instead, American carrier task forces begin operating like synchronized machines. Launch cycles tighten, recovery procedures speed up, strike coordination improves dramatically. The difference is not brilliance. It is repetition. Failures are not embarrassing, they are rehearsals. Each engagement is treated as a live experiment. What works is kept. What fails is discarded without sentiment. In Japanese naval culture, losing experienced aviators is catastrophic. Training pipelines are slow. Replacement pilots arrive with minimal hours. In the American system, losses are tragic, but anticipated. Training continues at scale. Lessons from combat are fed back into flight schools. New pilots arrive better prepared than those they replace. Axis analysts struggle to explain this resilience. Their models assume that heavy losses lead to exhaustion. But America seems to metabolize loss into improvement. By late 1943, German intelligence officers begin using a new phrase in internal reports, never meant for public speeches. Enemy learning curve. It is not flattering. It is frightening. Because a learning curve implies direction, and this one is steep. American failures are becoming shorter-lived. Each setback teaches something. Each lesson spreads across the force with industrial speed. The enemy is not merely replacing losses. He is replacing mistakes. And then comes the realization that chills even the most confident planners. There is no final form to fight. No perfected American army to prepare against. Because the version you face today is already obsolete. Tomorrow's enemy will be different, slightly better, slightly more lethal, and armed with knowledge bought by yesterday's blood. The Axis war effort is built to deliver decisive blows. But decisive blows require an enemy who stays down. This one doesn't. It studies the fall. It writes new rules while getting back up. And somewhere deep in the analysis rooms of Berlin and Tokyo, the unthinkable begins to form. Even if America loses the next battle, it will win the one after that. February 1944. A concrete bunker outside Berlin. The room smells of cold tobacco and damp paper. Maps cover the walls, Europe in grids and arrows, the Atlantic marked with shipping lanes that are growing uncomfortably crowded. A group of German analysts sits around a long table, eyes sunken, collars tight. They are not generals. They do not command armies. Their job is prediction. And for the first time, their predictions no longer agree with reality. Reports from Italy contradict those from France. Air loss estimates no longer line up with expected American replacement rates. Units destroyed on paper seem to reappear, reorganized, reinforced, and tactically improved. The analysts argue quietly at first. Perhaps Allied losses are being underestimated. Perhaps American morale will finally crack. Perhaps this pace cannot be sustained. But the numbers keep coming in. More aircraft. More crews. Fewer repeated mistakes. One analyst, older, cautious, circles a phrase in a captured American report translated into German. Lessons learned. It appears again and again. Not as an appendix. Not as an afterthought. But as a driving section, sometimes longer than the operational summary itself. This is deeply unsettling. In the German system, lessons are inferred by high command and filtered downward slowly. By the time they reach frontline units, the war has already moved on. Here, lessons seem to move faster than orders. And now, the cost of that difference becomes impossible to ignore. In Normandy preparations, German commanders expect predictable patterns. Landings will reveal weaknesses. Initial chaos will follow. Then, counterattacks will exploit confusion before the Allies can stabilize. It is how wars are supposed to work. But when the landings come, the chaos behaves differently. American units stumble, yes. Beaches are misidentified, communications break, officers are killed within minutes. But instead of freezing, the units adapt in place. Junior officers take over. Non-commissioned officers improvise routes off the beaches. Naval gunfire adjusts based on shouted corrections from shore. These are not heroic exceptions. They are trained responses. The system has taught its soldiers not to wait for perfection. Only improvement. German officers watching through binoculars sense it almost immediately. This enemy does not rely on a single plan. He carries several and discards them without regret when they fail. Within days, Allied operations change tempo. Mistakes from the first landings are not repeated inland. Supply bottlenecks are rerouted. Air-ground coordination improves visibly. German countermeasures, meanwhile, are static. They are brilliant. They are precise. They are too slow to evolve. The Axis has reached the point where learning itself has become a battlefield, and they are losing it. In Berlin and Tokyo, the realization hardens. They are not fighting an army bound by doctrine. They are fighting a process. And processes do not get tired. They do not cling to pride. They do not care how many times they fail, as long as each failure produces a better version. The Axis still believes in decisive moments. America believes in momentum. By 1944, that difference is fatal. Because the Allies are no longer catching up. They are pulling away. And for the first time, Axis analysts understand the truth they should have seen years earlier. The war was not decided by the first victories. It was decided by who learned fastest from defeat. And that race is already over, April 1945. Somewhere west of the Elbe River. The road is choked with wreckage, burned-out vehicles, abandoned artillery, wagons pulled into ditches and left to rot. German soldiers move in small groups now, uniforms faded, faces hollow. They no longer talk about victory. They talk about time. How much is left? Across the river, American units advance with a strange calm. There is no sense of desperation, no frantic rush to end things before something collapses. Because nothing is collapsing. You can see it in the way they move. When a bridge is blown, engineers are already measuring spans. When a unit encounters resistance stronger than expected, it doesn't stall, it shifts. Radios crackle, artillery adjusts, air support reroutes. Every problem already has a muscle memory response. German officers watching this advance feel something close to disbelief. This is not how an exhausted army behaves. By now, Axis analysts know the war is lost. The question haunting their final reports is not why they were defeated. That answer is obvious. The question is when. Because in hindsight, the turning point was not Normandy, not Midway, not Stalingrad or Kursk. It was earlier. It was quieter. It was the moment they dismissed American defeat as weakness. When Pearl Harbor was interpreted as humiliation instead of mobilization. When early bomber losses were seen as proof of incompetence rather than rehearsal. When clumsy beginnings were mistaken for permanent flaws. They never understood that America's greatest strength was not confidence. It was discomfort. An institutional willingness to admit this didn't work. And then do something about it immediately. German doctrine demanded excellence before action. American doctrine allowed action to produce excellence. One system protected pride. The other protected progress. By 1945, the difference is no longer theoretical. It is measured in divisions, in air superiority, in logistics that function even when the plan breaks. The Axis believed war was a test of perfection. America treated it as a process of iteration. And iteration favors scale. Iteration favors time. Iteration favors a nation that can afford to fail and learn and fail again, faster each time. In the final months, captured German officers are interviewed by Allied intelligence. Many are professional, polite, exhausted. One of them, a former analyst, offers a quiet observation. "We prepared to fight an army," he says. "We did not prepare to fight a method." That is the final truth. You cannot destroy a method with a single battle. You cannot intimidate it with early success. You cannot exhaust it as long as it keeps turning mistakes into momentum. America did not win because it was flawless. It won because it became less flawed faster than anyone else. And by the time the Axis realized this, there was nothing left to adapt. End